Yes, welcome back to another episode of The Whistle Blows. It's lovely to be back with you on a Friday, and tonight we've got a very, very special guest. Chief sports writer at The Sun, Martin Lipton, joining us to break down all things Tottenham. And obviously, as always, it's never a quiet time with the announced appointment of Igor Tudor today. A bit to chat through in terms of who really is running things at Spurs. Uh, a view on who might be coming in for the permanent role, and then we're going to have a little chat about Levy's sale of the shares, given Martin was the first person to drop that exclusive story around Brooklyn Eric being interested. But I'd like to start just by saying thanks so much for all of the support so far. We have been massively appreciative of all of the subscriptions and likes. Please don't forget to like this show as well. Subscribe if you want to shape the conversation. Feel free to drop in a super chat, and as always, we will be on Spotify and Apple afterwards. But just to start, Martin, thanks so much for joining us. How are you, mate?
Well, same as everybody else, really. Bemused, befuddled, frustrated, angry, annoyed, hopeful because it can't be worse than it's been, can it? I think the reality is this week had to happen, probably should have happened before. I know why it didn't to a degree, and in the end it was forced upon them. But it has happened. The manager has gone, and there's now 4 months left to 3.5 months left to save the season, or save the club, actually, rather than save the season, because the season's long gone. And just make sure that come the summer, when they appoint the bloke they want, that there's a Premier League club to appoint him to.
Yeah, indeed, mate. And Billy, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good. It's been exciting for this show. We organised it about a couple of weeks ago, and since then we've lost a manager. We've got a new manager. We've had a transfer window, and just about everything else has happened in between. And we lost a couple of games of football and might be relegated. So it's a very different show to the one we were planning 2 weeks ago, isn't it, Connor?
It is. I think I've had to rename and recreate the thumbnail twice in that time since I originally set up and scheduled it with Martin. I thought Martin would just be doing a sort of simple review on the Newcastle game and perhaps a bit of chat about this takeover news. But yeah, there's a little bit more to chew through. So I mean, maybe starting, Martin, love to get your take on before we jump into Tudor and the interim search. Perhaps your take on the whole Thomas Frank situation. I think from what you just said there, it sounds like you were supportive of the decision, but what did you make of his very short-lived reign?
Well, I said from the start that I genuinely thought it was going to be a good appointment. I really have a huge regard for him as a bloke and as a manager. I thought he did a really, really good job at Brentford, and I thought he'd come in and make it work. I thought he'd get everyone on board, particularly the fans. He'd bond everyone together. He'd have the same rapport he had at Brentford. And I was 100% wrong. It was a total mess from start to finish. He came in and the new music was wrong. Talking about Arsenal was stupid. The club was simply too big for him. And it became increasingly so that he was second-guessing himself. He had no faith in what he was doing. The players had no faith in him. The fans had even less faith in the lot of them put together, plus all the shenanigans behind the scenes off the field. And it's been horrific for weeks and months. I said I was on another show with you, Connor. I thought he should have gone. Thought they were going to do it after West Ham. I thought they expected them to do it on that Monday morning. They decided to effectively have a public execution against Dortmund, and then the idiot only went and beat Dortmund. That wasn't in the plan. And then beat Frankfurt. That wasn't in the plan. And so they put it off because of those Champions League results. But the Premier League results haven't got any better. I mean, they nicked a draw against City and played really well second half, but were awful first half. And against United, they played well for 20 minutes until the idiot Romero got himself sent off, and then it was inevitable they'd lose. And then Wednesday or Tuesday night was a shambles. First half in particular was appalling, wasn't it? It could not last. Something had to go. I actually thought that they'd have done it on the night if Šeško hadn't scored that last gasp equaliser for United. But they'd already obviously made the decision, and he went Wednesday morning. And by Spurs standards, bringing somebody in 2 days later is almost quick thinking, isn't it?
It is quick, and we'll definitely break that down a little bit because it's an interesting appointment, particularly given who has left the club as well in Paratici. And if we're to believe that Paratici was interested in replacing Frank with Tudor, it seems funny that's the way it's now played out. But I think, yeah, I mean, look, you weren't the only one who was wrong on Frank. I've been very open on the fact that I also was an advocate for the appointment before it was made. I thought he was going to be able to make that step up. And I think what is made apparent to me is how difficult it is to make that step up, right? From a club like Brentford, which is run fantastically, to maybe a club that isn't run quite so fantastically, but is massive. So is massively in the public eye, and the attention you get at Spurs. I mean, you'll love to hear your thoughts on this, because you've obviously been around those press boxes and press rooms. I'm observing now Brighton are getting very, very little attention, to be honest, even though they're dropping like a stone. If a big six club has results like that, it's everywhere, right?
I mean, I think if you look at Brentford and Brighton in particular, the model, the ownership model, and the fact that they went into this heavily data-led recruitment process a number of years ago. There's an awful lot of managers who look very good at those clubs. And yet when they've moved on elsewhere, particularly to bigger clubs, they've really struggled. So Potter being a prime example, not just at Chelsea, but also at West Ham, who are a bigger club than Brighton, because they're a London club, have that degree of scrutiny. Frank now at Brentford, then you look at what's happening with Keith Andrews. Do you think that Keith Andrews would do as good a job at Spurs as he's doing at Brighton? No, because the scale of the club, as Brentford rather, the scale of the club is that much bigger. There is Tottenham might not be a big four club, but they're a big six club, and more importantly, they're a big London club. Therefore, they get more media spotlight than comparable size clubs or slightly smaller clubs, because of where they are, where the desks are, where the reporters come from, a lot of them. I'm a long-standing London-based football reporter. There used to be more of us than anybody else. The desks on London were bigger than the rest of the country put together, and probably still are in most cases. London remains, because of where newspapers are printed, the focus. Even though there's obviously, Man United are a huge, Liverpool massive team, City are champions many times over. The focus hugely is on London clubs, and therefore you have to be able to deal with that scrutiny. And it can be too much. And I think we've seen it with Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank will go to Crystal Palace next year and be a success. But it does make you think, why would having seen a lot of these issues going on, would a big club, would Tottenham now even think about Oliver Glasner? I suspect that they'll be put off Glasner by Frank because of that. Because is it easier to manage a smaller club and very hard to manage a big club? And if you look at Glasner, he's having enough problems managing a small club at Palace at the moment. Likewise, Iriola's done a great job at Bournemouth. I think Frank's experience, and Graham Potter before him at Brighton, as I said, at Chelsea and West Ham, maybe makes big six clubs think again about making those appointments. I do think it will have an impact down the line on other managers.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, obviously it came off for us with Poch, right, in terms of Poch making that step up from Southampton. But that seems to be, I think there was a graph that was doing the rounds on Twitter of possession-based managers at smaller clubs that have then made the step up, and Poch was obviously in the top right box of that, because I think Brendan Rodgers was another one who was in the sort of, but all of the others that haven't played sort of that possession-based football as well, because that's what fans of bigger clubs demand as well, that you're able to have.
You have to have the ball.
This is it.
If you're Tottenham, you have to have the ball. You can't play at home with 44% possession, 43% possession. And far too often over these last few months, the only time Spurs have had the ball was when they were trailing, when the other team let them have the ball, because they weren't fearful. Because if the only player who can score is a centre half, you're not too worried about conceding. And that's been the problem, hasn't it, really? I mean, there was some, Solanke obviously wasn't playing for a long while, and he's the best centre forward, the only centre forward who can actually hurt teams with his dynamism and his power and his running and his pressing. So Spurs haven't been able to hurt you. Even when they had the ball, they couldn't hurt you. And the problem was, under Frank, all the chances in the main, 80% of them were set pieces or long-range shots. Never played through anyone. Because how often do they get to halfway and turn back? Time and time and time and time again. And that's unacceptable over a medium term, let alone over the long term. And you might argue that 6 months isn't long enough, 8 months isn't long enough, but it's long enough to make a judgment. And the judgment was universal and damning, and we heard it with every boo that came out for a number of matches now. And it started to the warning signs actually were as long ago as Bournemouth at home, weren't they? Third game of the season, and then there was Wolves. And then there was all the others, and then there was Chelsea, and it's just been a relentless series of unacceptably poor performances.
And Martin, you mentioned that Chelsea game. That was the first sign that we saw. If you remember back at that game, that was when Jed Spence and Mickey van der Ven walked off away from Frank. Now, since Frank has been sacked, we've seen a lot of reports of discipline issues, that the players aren't particularly weren't happy, all kind of problems behind the scenes. Just wondering from your point of view, how it sort of works behind the scenes. Are these the sort of things that were known from journalists his entire time, or why is it that they're published after he's gone? If that makes sense, or is it something that has this always been sort of has it been quite known in the industry that he's struggling with discipline?
I mean, I think these things go on at all clubs all the time, and they get kept quiet when things are going well, because players are humans and they get the hump. And then when the manager goes, the agents start briefing and start talking to people and want it out there. And the club sometimes, is it? Yeah, and the club sometimes want it out there to justify the decision they've made. So I can now go back over and loads of managers who you were writing things that the club were denying until they sack him, and then by the way, that was right and that was right. It's what happens at all clubs. It's not just a Spurs thing. And I also genuinely think I won't use the words, but I remember going to speak to a manager, a pretty old-fashioned, good manager, a few years ago, and I said, "What about this and this?" And he just said to me, "Players, there's a break," and they used a really aggressive, the most foul expletive you can use, shall we say? And he's right, because they're incredibly selfish. They don't care because they always get another chance. The nature of football, you're not going to sack the entire squad, although crikey, you look at that squad and you might want to do. You're always going to get another go, and they turn and they don't fancy a manager, they'll get rid of him. Look, I saw it at Chelsea 4 or 5 times post Mourinho, even the end of Mourinho himself second time. Players' dressing rooms think that they're powerful enough to get rid of managers, and they do it because as long as they get rid of the manager early enough, they can turn things around. The trouble with them turning on Frank and not wanting him, clearly, is that the board didn't want to listen to them. The board wanted to believe, I mean, a little bit it was the Vinay and the Arteta that, if you go too early, you make a mistake. Actually, they've gone too late. And it's really sad because, as I said, it's not that he's a bad manager. He's just a bad fit. And that's also down to the attitude of too many of those players. I think some of them should look hard and long in the mirror. And they won't because they're footballers, but they're responsible more than the manager because it's them who make those decisions. It's those players who have been bloody awful for weeks and months on end. And they'll just blame the manager and move on. And suddenly some of those players who've been garbage will turn up because that's what happens. And that's why it was a necessary act, if overdue. But yeah, there's clearly been massive issues behind the scenes. I don't think him mentioning Arsenal a bit is really a bad thing. Like, he shouldn't have done it. Doesn't do great with the fans. Players can't use that as an excuse for the fact that they haven't been playing well enough. The fact that anybody can walk through that midfield because it's rubbish. Because the fact that Porro doesn't get back when no one gets on the end of the cross and suddenly there's a 40-yard hole at right back. These are sort of things that are down to the players, not the manager.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, and you're spot on around the sort of the player power, because the problem is ultimately, and particularly at Tottenham, given how little we did in the January window, you're not going to replace that many players,
No.
are you? And you only get 2 opportunities to do that, right? So it's a lot easier to remove a manager, right? And I suspect, well, touch wood, we do get a new manager bounce, and we'll come on to Tudor in a second. But some of that I don't think is necessarily about the manager you're bringing in or that new manager being fantastic. It's just that players that
And
were
new voice. Yeah.
performing below the level suddenly decide to turn up a bit more, right? And turn on that extra 5%.
And also, they know they're in trouble. They know where they're. Look, it's 4 wins from 12 keeps them up. That's the reality. So you'd hope they'll gird their loins and actually play a bit and get those 4 wins. Also, the animosity and negativism amongst the fans disappears and abates now. So that game against Arsenal, even if they go in 1-0 down and have been struggling, the mood will be very different to the mood that would have been if Frank had still been at the helm. So everything changes. Players have now got to play for their place because if he goes with a 3, which is likely, that changes the balance of the side. All of these things are different, and therefore you hope that there'll be a reaction. It's not guaranteed by any stretch because they're still not very good collectively.
No, and with a number of players out as well, right? So
You can't wave a wand and make them fit again. They're all injured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so maybe moving on to that then. So with the search, I think you mentioned earlier in your first sort of intro that for Tottenham this is fairly quick, right? In terms of the 2-day turnaround, in terms of finding Tudor. Do you think it was only him they were really talking to, Martin, during this phase? And as I said earlier,
I think there were a few. I think Rosa came and went in a matter of hours this morning, didn't they? So clearly there have been conversations with him. They needed someone who's willing to come in until the end of the season. Because I think, look, we 3 here could all come up with the same name, let's put it. And I think everybody tuning in will come up with the same name who they want for next season. We'll discuss that in a bit, I'm sure. So it's looking for someone who would be willing to take on till the end of the season, who had some sort of track record, who had some sort of reasonable cachet, whether as a player or a manager. And Tudor arguably ticks both of those boxes. And that's it, really. It's like a bit of a gun for hire, short-term mercenary.
Yeah, and Bill, I mean, we were both saying backstage that we obviously know a little bit about Tudor, but I don't think either of us would profess to be experts on his career to date or the sort of style of play that he has played at those clubs he's been manager of. But he has, in a very Tottenham way, been a manager of 11 clubs in 12 years. So he fits that the unique way of changing managers. And here I'm just pulling up on the screen for those that are watching on video. Recent record after mid-season appointments, so in his interim gigs, and both at Juventus and Lazio, exactly the same: 5 wins out of 9 free draws, 1 loss. So he's got a track record, at least in terms of those interim appointments. I don't think it went quite to plan when he took up the permanent job at Juventus. Bill, what do you make of the appointment? You're on mute, mate.
Yeah, he's almost like a specialist interim manager of some sort. He's done this kind of job before, hasn't he, where he saved the club from relegation. He steadied the ship at a few places. I have to be honest, this morning I was not expecting this at all. It's not something that it wasn't even a tenuous link this morning, and then it suddenly just came out of nowhere and developed very, very quickly. Obviously, he's been linked to Paratici before, and I think he was assistant to Pirlo at Paratici's Juventus. And I think he was manager, and then he got made assistant manager to Pirlo, and then eventually, obviously, he did end up taking up the Juventus job. But I think he's done an okay job at interim, and he's struggled long term. So, in that respect, it's kind of perfect for what we want, right? It's just, keep us up, and then we'll hire someone else who, as Martin alludes to, we'll definitely talk about in a minute. But not something I was expecting this morning at all. The more I read about him, I can see where they're coming from. They're obviously wanted somebody experienced and someone who's literally done this job before. I think the struggle that they had is because of that, the elephant in the room of who they're going to appoint in summer. they're probably struggling to find people who wanted to come in just for this short term only. Obviously, managers like Robbie Keane are probably less keen to give up a full-time job and think, right, well, you're only going to have me for a couple of months, then I'll be sacked, or then I'll be gone, and then you'll get your other manager in. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. It was come out of the blue completely. I put a tweet out this morning saying, what does anyone think about this? What does anyone know about it? And the response was really negative. He seems to have quite a bad reputation, but I think that, since then a couple of people have said, well, he's a decent interim at least, and that's basically what he is a specialist interim manager. So I guess in that respect, it's good. Definitely not expecting it though.
And Martin, given the sort of, I suppose one thing you would say is, probably ordinarily, if a club was in our sort of perilous situation right now, they might be looking at someone who's got a bit of Prem experience as a bit of a specialist, the Dyches, the Allardyces, those types of managers. Do you think it's a risk, this one, in terms of someone with no Prem experience? And as we just discussed, I know he's got some good experience in terms of being an interim, but do you see any risk with this one?
Well, given he's coming into a league he's never played in, let alone managed in, yes. But if the change hadn't been made, Spurs would have ended up with 32 points this season. So I'm hoping it'll be better than that. It only needs possibly 3 wins, certainly 4 wins, to be absolutely fine. So you do need a new voice. You need someone who's going to change things. And the sort of suggestion I've seen is that his philosophy is more front foot, despite preferring to play with a 3 at the back. He likes to get the ball forward. That's probably just, it just to galvanise the punters and turn up with a bit more energy. That's the key, isn't it? Because if you get the fans on board, they will carry you. They'll carry a team. Look at that. There's enough games that Spurs have got at home where just winning those games will keep up. And discounting Arsenal, we've got Everton at home, we've got Forest at home. These are games that should be winnable. We've got Wolves away. There are matches there that you really should be winning if you've got anything about you. So that is part of it, I think, now, just to change that mentality. But yeah, of course, you don't know how it will work. You don't know how the players will react and respond, but they have to, and they know that now, because they're not all that good that they're going to get a team in the Premier League next season if Tottenham get relegated.
Yeah, great.
Some of those players will be playing Championship football, quite a lot of them next season. So and none of them want to do that, I promise you. So how do they avoid it? They turn up, they start to play, start to show a little bit, and that's what's required. But yeah, anytime you take a manager with no experience in the league, it can be a gamble. And for every Mourinho or Wenger, there's 20 who were rubbish, and that's the danger, isn't it? You never know. But a lot of those who ended up not doing very well did start okay, and that's what is given what they need now. It's basically the engine has gone flat. You've got the jump leads in, you've got to jump start the car, and then you've only got to go round, the block a few times, and you're okay.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, you just touched on it before around sort of formation. So yeah, again, for those on video, just showing us a picture here from Sky Sports around. I think he's played out of 124 games a back three 120 times, so quite clearly a favoured formation. But in terms of what I've read, it seems to be wants to play a back three, but also with a fairly aggressive press, which again I think our fans will be happy to see again. For me, that was one of my biggest disappointments with Thomas Frank, actually, after playing a decent press against PSG in the Super Cup and Man City away, and starting with that sort of man-to-man press, then just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. It was quite painful to watch. So I think that will be interesting. Although at the moment, Bill, obviously the struggle is actually finding 3 centre halves, right?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously there's no official news on Danso yet, but there's strong rumours that he might not be back for the rest of the season. I think you're probably going to see Paulinho come into the back three is probably the most likely at the moment. And then even for fullbacks, we're struggling because obviously we've got Porro injured, we've got Udogie injured, we've got Spence, who's a right footer playing on the left back. Martin, do you think our first sort of look at this team, and couldn't be a more daunting game that he's got first up? Do you think it'll be sort of Spence and Archie Gray as his first fullbacks if he does favour a back five?
I don't think he's got anybody else who can play there, unless you were to throw Byfield in at the back, which I don't think he do against Arsenal. He'll have 4 days or 5 days to have a look at them next week. But your suspicion will be Paulinho, Radoshin, Van der Ven, Gray, and Spence, and then I don't know, Gallagher and Sarr as the two in midfield, and then maybe two up and Simmons in behind with Kolo Muani and Solanke up top. Or given he knows Kolo Muani from Juventus, that's the most likely you would have thought. And then what have you got left? Tell on the bench, and that's it. Bunch of kids.
And it's a good job that he doesn't seem to favour wingers. Our wingers are all injured, aren't they? So
yeah.
It's a good job that he doesn't. He gets his whip from the fullbacks. What have you sort of what do you know about him and Kolo Muani? Because I know there's a bit of history there, isn't there?
Well, a little bit. I mean, look, he did okay for him, didn't he? That was the key. I mean, to be honest, I'm not a massive student of the intricacies of Serie A. I can't pretend I am. So I know my knowledge of Tudor is that he's been a bit of a hoppy around manager. He was a manager who we knocked out of the Champions League, remember, when he was at Marseille. I don't know quite how we won that game because we were battered for most of it. Who was it? The boy centre half who ended up with Barcelona scored the header, didn't he?
Longley,
yeah. Longley scored, and then Højbjerg on the counter in the last minute to win it and win the group. And we've beaten 2-0 at home with Richarlison's only goals for about 6 months, from memory. But yeah, it's been. I just want to see a bit more something about the club, about the team, and if he can get a tune out of Kolo Muani, then great. If the others are willing to put the effort in, then great. And the other thing is, crikey, we've still got the Champions League to play for. I know we're not going to win it, crikey, but we're going to have a real good chance of getting to the last 8 before we get beat by Liverpool. And then, and who knows? I mean, it could be, if you win the couple of league games around that, then they really are a free hit. You could enjoy and relax because no one's worried. And who knows what's happening? We weren't very good in 2019 and we got to the final.
Might be a Di Matteo situation going on.
Absolutely. I mean, they were down and out by the time when he came in after the first leg of that quarter final. And look what happened. Last 16. Who knows? I just think what we do need is to have something to cling hold of, because at the moment it's just been beyond miserable. It really has.
And obviously that game coming up, do you think the atmosphere will be a lot better now that we've got a new manager, Thomas Frank's not there? Do you think the fans will be right behind them against Arsenal now on next Sunday?
Well, it certainly will before kick-off. I mean, how long it lasts into the first half when Arsenal go 3 up, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it could be really fun. And if the miracle were to happen, can you imagine what it would be like? It'd be like every Christmas come at once, wouldn't it? I don't think it will happen, but look at the way Brentford just stopped them last night. A lot of it was just sheer commitment and effort, and that's what's been lacking.
To win, I thought Brentford.
They were the better of 2 teams. Yeah, I think they. I mean, albeit the Martinelli could have nicked it right at the death, that would have been daylight robbery. Yeah. Actually, sometimes just being able to run as hard as the opposition can help close it. Also, Arsenal need to win. So. The longer it goes on and it's level, the more desperate Arsenal get. If Arsenal go 3 up, it doesn't matter. But if it's 1-1 with 20 minutes to go, Arsenal can't afford a 1-1. So that changes the dynamic, and the crowd will sense that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it wouldn't be. I mean, although in recent years it hasn't felt that much of a derby, because it seems that unfortunately they've been beating us quite convincingly at home, but it wouldn't be a shock in terms of there's been poor Tottenham teams over the years that managed to hold, Wenger's Arsenal to draws at home and things. They actually very rarely beat us at White Hart Lane, right? Even when we were we were poor. So yeah, you're right. The pressure is all on them for sure.
And as always with Tottenham, there's a bit of sort of, we're not entirely sure what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, we spoke a little bit about before. Since this January, we've lost a director of football. It's kind of unclear who's calling the shots, because obviously Parash, was rumored to be in charge of the football team, and then Langer was supposed to be in charge of the youth team. But then it's a bit confusing because Parash was also strongly tipped to want Igor Tudor. Do you have any sense, Martin, where has this sort of decision come from, do you think? Because conflicting reports, some say, it's driven by Vinay and Langer, some say it's driven by the Lewis family. Obviously, Parash must be somewhere involved, because this is the name that he was heavily linked with. And as always with Tottenham, it's never clear who's running the show behind the scenes. Do you have any sense where this sort of came from?
What they say, that a camel's a horse designed by committee. There you are, really. I mean, there's too many voices, actually, if anything. Look, Indica have obviously got their own voice. They've got Lewis's son-in-law, who appears to be increasingly powerful. The one thing I do know is that Vinay, who would normally go to every Premier League meeting, was not the one that started yesterday and finished today. He was at Spurs. He was involved with whatever was going on. Langer, I assume, was also. I think they're all voices in it, and it seems to be Vinay was the one who sort of suggested to the board on Tuesday night that they had to do it, and he found a willing audience for that. But I think they'd already decided that was the case anyhow, and they needed him to say it because he is the chief exec, and he's got to come up with he's expected to have the ideas. I think the problem is there's maybe too many conflicting voices, and that's why we've ended up with the dribble of making the final decision on Frank. No one was strong enough to say, you know what, sadly we've got to bite the bullet here. And they'd rather, let's just give it one more game than actually make a decision. They wanted the decision to be made for them, which eventually happened on Tuesday night. And that's a sign of weakness at board level. So whoever is making the final decision, they're not strong enough in their own mind. Now, that may be because the Lewises have only been really active for a few months. It may be that there's still some little fighting and sort of in terms of sparring at the board as to who wants to be the ones to take responsibility. At the moment, if you could tell me who's running Spurs, you're a better man than me, because I don't think anybody actually knows. Before, whatever you thought about Daniel, you knew he was running the club.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Now, you may not have liked it, but at least you knew who was making the decision. There was a face to throw brickbats at. Now, no one knows who's actually responsible. And no one wants to say, it's me, baby. And isn't that a problem? They all want to hide behind everybody else. No one has got the courage to say, this is my call. No one's come out today. No one's come out today and fronted up this decision. Nobody. How many people are there on that board? Someone should be saying, this is why we've done it. None of them have. Why is that? Because they're weak.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, that I've been very critical of Levy, but I think he was a very useful shield probably for Joe Lewis, who really should be the person who gets more of the criticism in terms of the way that Tottenham have been run over the last 25 years. And now, it's interesting. I mean, there's some rumours circulating that he is still involved. Joe Lewis in making these.
The bloke who's actually put all the money in the club, that he's involved, and it isn't his family trust. Can't believe that. That's a ridiculous claim. I mean, why is the trust there? Because he was worried about going to jail, and he'd been booted. He cannot be on the board because he's failed the owners and directors test. If it's his kids who are on the board, they're proxies, aren't they? It's as simple as that. He's still he's still running the club. Still his club.
Yeah. And I mean, with Charrington as well. Obviously, Charrington is very, very close to Joe Lewis, right? I mean, they lived on the same complex and everything else, right? So,
no complex though. Yeah, I went there a few years ago. I like the Bahamas. I could live in there.
Oh, did you? Have you been? Nice.
Yeah, I went to the Hero Golf Challenge that they play out there, and I got invited out to do the tournament on condition that I did a picture of Tiger Woods on a bike, here on a motorcycle. And I did 6 days. Great. I really enjoyed it. It was a great trip. Very good fun. But Levy there was a banquet, and Lewis was guest of honour at the banquet because his yacht was moored next to this sort of space where the banquet took place. And he was very tight with Tiger Woods. Tiger likes him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think he designed some of the golf courses, isn't he, on the complex? Wasn't it? Yeah. And look, I think we obviously touched on it earlier a little bit around the fact that quite clearly it was only ever going to be an interim because he's magic, it sounds like maybe coming back in the summer. Is that, Martin, do you think that's a foregone conclusion in terms of Poch coming back?
I wouldn't say foregone conclusion because it's football, but I would be astonished if it wasn't him for a variety of reasons. They need to make a popular appointment. Poch would be a popular appointment. He still lives in London. He's desperate to get back to the Premier League. He would prefer to be in the Premier League in London. What other London club would take him? Where else could he go? There's only one place he can go. And he wants to come, and he would love to come back. And also, I think this issue at the end was with Daniel. Daniel is no longer there, so it's a clean start, effectively. And speaking to people who know Poch, I'm told that he sees the situation the club is in now as actually better than the one he inherited in 2014. That he thinks actually there's more quality in the squad than he had when he came into that squad. And I pointed out, but he didn't have he had a generational centre forward in the youth team. And he said, but no one really knew that at the time. That became apparent 6 months later. No one knew at the time that Harry Kane was going to be the greatest English striker of his maybe of all time, and certainly of his generation. And he had Yunus Kabul as captain at the start, and Vertonghen had fallen out with Sherwood, and Lloris didn't want to stay, and others didn't fancy it. And look at what he did there. And his view is, I can do the same again. So let's hope if and when it happens. The trouble, of course, is he can't say or do anything until the day after the US go out of the World Cup. So we're going to have this void for the best part of 2 months. Now, if in that void Spurs are signing £300 million worth of players, then it's pretty obvious that the players have been told who the manager is. If they don't do anything for that period from the end of May till the end of the World Cup, it becomes an issue that they haven't got the manager lined up. Because no player worth his salt is going to go if he doesn't know who his manager's going to be. So they've got to let it be obvious to the players they're signing who the manager is. But I suspect that it will be Pochettino, The Return, Part 2, however you want to describe it, the sequel, and we will see what happens. Look, it may not be because it's football, but I think it's pretty likely at the way things are going.
No, I never really sort of credit with Tottenham for having, or certainly recently for having any sort of long-term plan in place. They certainly don't act like it at the moment. But do you think there's any sort of chance that maybe we could sort of get a pre-contract with Poch, and then maybe because Langer, after his interview 2 weeks ago, said that they were already starting to plan for summer. Do you think there's any chance that these conversations will already be ongoing with Pochettino about who he wants in the playing
I would think so. I would be amazed if they're not. The only thing is neither party can say anything. Particularly because it's a US World Cup. And he doesn't want to get accused by certain slightly orange-featured politicians, shall we say, of being a traitor to the country that's given him some sort of sanctuary from the world, etc., all this sort of nonsense. So it will end up having to go on behind the scenes and never be public, even though he's going to be asked, at least for the first few US press conferences, what his plans are. And as soon as the US go out, the next question will be what your plans are. I mean, he's going to be asked, at least during the tournament, he can say, I'm here to coach the US at the World Cup. That's all I'm thinking of. And I want to talk him starts, he can get away with that. But in the build-up, he can't. And even next month, there'll be people going out to the US next month for their friendlies just so they can ask Pochettino about Spurs. Absolutely nailed on. If they're not, if they haven't got if they've got the budget, it's a dereliction of duty. Because I would, if I was in charge and had the money that I could spend, I'd be sending my Sky Sports News cameraman. I'd spending whichever one it is to go out and get Pochettino about Spurs. Just obvious, isn't it? That's what I would. You'd have to do that.
Yeah, I've already seen a couple of American fans online on American podcasts, American football podcasts, annoyed that he didn't mention the World Cup in the Jake Humphrey interview over the Premier League. I think that kind of the sort of distrust from the USA is already creeping in, because he's not shy about talking about this guy, is he? He's not shy about mentioning us in interviews. This guy, Pochettino.
I mean, it was the ultimate come and get me, plea, as they say, wasn't it? Really, please, I'm here. Over here, remember me? I did a good job. Remember, I'm available. Just a few months. I can come if you want me. You know my number. You got it. Give us a buzz. Don't tell anyone. It's one of those conversations. Brilliant. Fair play. I mean, nothing wrong with that. And it would be. I don't think everyone would be jumping through hoops in excitement, but the majority would. And look, what was the chant on Tuesday night? Now, a bit of it was anything to get at Frank, but it's also because people remember. The only time in the last 25 years, 35 years, the Spurs have looked like potentially being the best team in the land was under him. It was, and they were. They could have won the league twice. Should have won the league once in one of those 2 years, even if they were never top in the Leicester year, which people forget. And it was the injury to Kane at the start of the next season that killed them, because once they learned how to play without Kane, they were virtually unstoppable the following season. It was just they had that 6-7 game run when they lost Kane. They couldn't win the game. They drew most of those matches, didn't they, rather than losing them, and that allowed Chelsea to get without that ridiculous 13-match winning run, and the gap was too big.
Yeah, I mean, for me with Poch, I completely agree with you. I think I think he obviously did a fantastic job at Spurs, and to be honest, people like to downplay what he's done since, but I actually thought he did a decent job at Chelsea in the end. I think he turned their form around. I think.
You not think the worry was a Pochettino signing?
Yeah. Well,
he loves it. Doesn't he? So.
But it feels like the perfect PR card as well for ENIC 2.0, doesn't it? Because to your point, the fans will get on board with that. So it's an easy thing. It's an easy win for them. But I suppose one point I would like to sort of chat about is this director of football piece, right? Because I think it's pretty uniform across the Spurs fan base now that Langer probably needs to go, or is at least not fit for purpose to be, the primary director of football. And all of the rumours are that they're going to continue Martin with this 2 director of football model, which seems slightly odd. Is that what you're hearing as well, Martin, in terms of that?
Well, it seems to be the direction of travel. Look, I mean, I don't know what Langer does, apart from doing nothing, trite, bland interviews every few months that go nowhere. I see nothing in anything I've seen or heard or read or whatever of him to make me think, this is the energetic, live wire man to take Tottenham Hotspur forward. Where he's been elsewhere, they couldn't wait for him to leave. It tells you all you need to know. I just don't, people fall upwards. He's one of them. And it's about time he fell completely, I think. Let's get rid. Seriously, I don't see what he does. I don't really care what the model is, as long as the model works, because there is no one way of doing it. Every club can do it differently. Some of it is about the manager-led recruitment. Others, it's executive-level, chief exec-led recruitment. Others, it's sporting director. It doesn't matter what the model is, just everyone on the same page and get the right recruitment done, and do it early as well, and do it. But, identify what's needed and get the pieces that fit rather than getting things that might fit and hoping you can weld them together with a blowtorch. It doesn't work like that. Actually buy the parts that fit the engine. And that's not happened for too long. You can't just buy kits and hope they're going to work. Yes, you want to have some young players who are going to become long-term players for the club. And I think, Bergvall and Gray could be really good players for Tottenham long-term. And I don't think they're, certainly last season, they weren't the reason we were 17th, and nor are they the reason with this season that we're 16th. And in fact, if Bergvall was fit, he would be starting on Sunday week without question, because he's got far more to offer than Sarr, I think, long-term. But when Sarr's not there at the moment, you notice it because he's just got legs. But, Basuma, what are we doing with Basuma playing central midfield? Even with all the injuries, anybody else, they've wanted him out the club for 3 years. Why are we pretending? Since he got sent off at Luton in the first Pochettino, Postecoglou season, he's been an absolute liability. Let's not kid it. He's been rubbish. What's he still doing at the club? Sell him, give him away, pay him off, anything. Just show that you mean it. Rather than just let him in drib to the end of the contract. What's the point in that? You're not going to get anything from the end of the season anyhow. You're going to get nothing out of him while he's here. Bin him off in September. Just bin him. Show a bit of gumption from the sporting director. Look, sometimes great signings don't work. Prime example, Ndombele. Anybody tells you that they didn't think Ndombele was a good signing is lying.
Yeah,
he just was a disaster because he was the most unprofessional footballer I've ever seen. But nobody knew that when he turned up. Sometimes players that shouldn't work. That's, it can just happen. But if it's not working, the key is to identify, why isn't it working? Is it fixable? If it's not, then don't try and fix it, because it's never going to work. And that's what the sporting director with the manager should be looking to do. It should be part of his remit. And in fact, it's just too much drift and inertia. Jed Spence will play left back. He's not a left back. He's the only one available. Okay, fine. Is Jed Spence going to be left back next season? I bloody well hope not. Doesn't mean he shouldn't be one of the two right backs. Why are we going into the season with only one proper left back who's not 33 and injury prone? And it's not Ben Davies' fault that he's kicked 3 balls all season, but it was pretty likely it might happen at this stage in his career. So we've ended up with Udogie, who we know has been injury prone because he got that injury at the end of the first Postecoglou season. And how many games did he miss last season? So why was there not a proper left back cover ball in the summer? And that's on the sporting director and the manager, but the sporting director, and loads of that. What we do? No, it's unfortunate that he didn't get Gibbs White, who obviously they thought they'd lined up, and that's, Gibbs White is going to be regretting it, I think, hopefully by the end of the season. And it's really unfortunate that Maddison got injured and that Kulusevski was injured and then Solanke. Yeah, deal with it. Do something about it. Simmons, a bit like Wirtz, it's taken him 6 months to look a player. Now he's looking a player. But that was 6 months where you actually could have done with somebody else, so that Simmons didn't have to play 75 minutes of every game. But sometimes he just came in and out for half an hour when the game opened up and got confidence by playing in a more fractured, broken field scenario than having to try and break down teams when they're fresh. All of these things weren't thought through.
Completely. And going to come on to that point in just a second. We are going to go for a quick break if you're listening on audio. And thank you very much. There are hundreds of you in here watching. So please like and subscribe. We're really, really grateful for Martin's time. We're not going to keep you guys too much longer because it's a Friday night. But just coming on to that very point that you made there, Martin, about the recruitment has been pretty poor, generally speaking, pretty much historically under ENIC. I just wondering what you made of Ange's comments that have come out this week and the interview that he did on the Overlap, because he was talking about it's been a long time since Tottenham made a wow signing and things like that. Was there anything surprising in that interview, or was he just repeating stuff that we already know pretty much?
I couldn't think of anything that surprised me at all. I mean, he articulated what a lot of fans think, but it wasn't exactly a shock that Spurs don't spend £100 million on a player, and because they never spent £100 million on a player. What's the record signing? 60 million. So therefore, moaning that they're not spending 70 or 80 is irrelevant, because they were never. It's not going to happen at Tottenham. I don't think it might do, but it never has done up to now for a variety of reasons. And also, again, look, he won the Europa League. Last season was not good. Last season was bloody awful. Let's not pretend otherwise. You don't, as I've said on a few times, you can't let 90 minutes and then the celebrations cloud the memory of the previous 19 months. It wasn't good enough. And yes, injuries played a part, but once again, it's on the manager to do something about it. And he didn't. And they won the Europa League because the players decided how they were going to play. Player-led.
Yeah,
and anything about that was ended by that Van der Ven interview also on the overlap a few months ago, when he basically said, me and Romero told the manager how we were going to play in Europe, and that's what we did. And look, it wasn't difficult to ask. I was saying that at the time because it was evident to me this was player-led rather than manager-led. Now, there were moments under Pochettino, Pochettino, which were great. The first few weeks, first 10 games, really good. But then he didn't adapt to the change in evolving circumstances, and last season was rubbish. There's no way of avoiding that. Particularly, we won 4 games all year in the league at home. That's not acceptable. That's 2 managers. It's not just one; it's 2. And it's all well and good saying, "Yeah, well, we knew we were safe." Even then, we lost at home to Forest, who were poor. It was one thing losing Forest in the first half of the season. Second half of the season, everyone knew what Forest were doing. So don't let them do it. Give them the ball for 20 minutes and watch them give away an own goal, because they don't know how to play with the ball. They're a counter-attacking team. Sometimes you actually need to feed an opponent's weakness, not their strength. And he never did that. Every time with Postecoglou, he fed the opponent's strength.
No, I agree. And look, I think 2 things can be true at once, can't they? That Frank has been massively underwhelming and disappointing, but Ange was, we can't really revise history on Ange. That it was poor last season. It's been 2 poor managers in a row. But ultimately, it's also the legacy of the way that the football club has been mismanaged, right? As well, regardless of
it goes back to
who's in the dugout.
It goes all the way back to the decisions that were made when the stadium was being built. And it's not unusual for a club to do it. Arsenal did it when they moved into the Emirates. That for 2 or 3 years, the team suffered because the money had to go. They couldn't spend the same money that they would have wanted to because there were other commitments. But that ground is now a cash cow. Tottenham this season will gross over £600 million if you include. They've already made 70 odd million out of the Champions League.
Yeah.
They won't have that next year, that's for certain, unless they win it, and they're not going to win it. But even next year, a poor year without Europe, it will still be over £500 million if they're in the Premier League. It isn't as if it's a poor club. There is, ever since the plans were badly. COVID could not have come at a worse time for Tottenham, just because they just finally opened the coffers. The money was going to start coming in, and then within a year of the opening of the stadium, everything shut down. That was a global thing, but the plans have been based on this revenue stream coming on tap, and that was obviously delayed for 18 months. So there are external factors as well. And timing's just one of those things. But it all comes down to the issues that were necessary as a consequence of the stadium are still being felt now because the owners have been unwilling to change the model. The business model has not changed. The revenue, a percentage of revenue to wages to revenue, 44%. That's why. Go to 60% and look at where you are. Because unfortunately, as a rule, the more you spend, the better your team is. It's not an absolute cut and fast rule, but it's a massive corollary and always has been.
Agreed, and look, you've touched on a lot of the things that we talk about a lot on this on this channel, where we're particularly critical of ENIC and Martin. You know from my Twitter account how critical I am of the way that ENIC, the model that they've operated, and I think for me though the slight difference with the Arsenal comparison is that Arsenal did that at a time where they were very honest about doing that in terms of actually using money to pay off the stadium. We haven't actually paid off any of the debt of the stadium, and you've got quotes from Levy at the time of the stadium's going to have no impact on the transfer budget, and obviously evidently it did, because we went multiple transfer windows without signing a single player. And as you say, you look at the net spend under Poch, and it was very, very low, sort of averaging £13 million a year. So I think if they were honest and upfront at the time of building the stadium, and they said, look, it's going to be tough for a few years, it will impact transfers, and we're going to use the money to pay off the debt for the stadium because we think that's the right thing to do, I think fans maybe would have been more accepting of that. But I think it's the fact that they haven't done that either, and all they've done is continue to invest in sort of property around the area and everything else, right, that fans get frustrated. But I think it's we need to see a change in that model. It's I've looked at the numbers over the whole of ENIC's reign. The average is at 47%, right? When they took over, it was 56%. So it's been an active choice that they've made to operate this model where they don't pay wages.
And we're sort of starting to see, if you look at the last two transfer windows in particular, they have signed a couple of players that are on higher wages. Do you sort of have any sense, Martin, that in summer, where obviously it's going to be a massive transfer window for Tottenham, do you think they finally sort of woken up to this wages thing now? Because they have signed Conor Gallagher, Xavi Simons, so players that they are hopefully starting to move the dial a little bit. Obviously, they've got a long way to go. What do you think about this upcoming summer in the Lewis family? Do you think this is actually going to be a time, they promised an ambitious football team. They promised to put the football team first. They promised an ambitious transfer window. They put that 100 million into the club. Do you think we're actually going to finally see something in summer, or are you skeptical, like, a lot of our sort of viewers tend to be on the show?
I've got to see them show the money. Show us, it's old Jerry Maguire again, isn't it? Show us the money, spend it. It's all well and good talking about it.
Yeah.
The only way that they're going to make a difference and to transform the mood of the fans, and by the way, actually raise the value of the club if they want to sell it, and I do think they want to sell it, is to actually invest in the football team.
Yeah.
Because no matter how many times you have Rihanna, how many times you have the Washington Commanders, whatever they're called now, however many times you have people going around the go-kart track, and it's good fun, by the way, the go-kart track. I really enjoyed it when I went the other week. It's the football club that is the value. And if you're getting, if you want more sponsorship to increase the value, you need a better team. If you want to actually do the flipping stadium naming rights 10 years on, you need a better team. It's just like you've got to have a team that can compete. Aston Villa have done brilliantly over the last few years because they've got a good manager and everyone's aligned. If Spurs are aligned under a good manager, Aston Villa will finish 15 points behind them every season.
Mm-hmm.
Because Spurs can afford to spend that much more on players and get a team together. It's simple. It's football economics. If you get it right and you've got big bucks and your recruitment is right and your manager is right and the coaching is right, with better players, you will get better results. Everything's got to be in place, and that's been the problem. But Spurs have got this huge inbuilt advantage, which they are squandering astonishingly. But the great thing about football is that it isn't always the way it is. Things change rapidly. Look at Manchester United, who, if someone had said to you in 2013 that United won't win the league for the next 13 years, you'd have laughed.
Yeah.
Things change really quickly. Spurs were finishing above Arsenal for 6 years on the spin, having been behind them for 20 years on the spin. Spurs finished above Liverpool for, I think it was 9 years out of 10, having not finished above them for 20 years. It can happen very quickly if you do it right. And so even when things are bad, and they are bad, if you get it right very swiftly, because of the base you've got, it can look really good, really swiftly.
Yeah, agreed. And look, I think it's something that we talk about a lot, and it seems to be the glaring miss that for apparently great business people, they've never quite grasped the whole speculate to accumulate. And as you say, that we've capped out almost now on what we can make until they make the football club successful, right? The football team successful, and then everything else. You get Champions League regularly, your commercial sponsors go up, and everything goes up, and that's the next step for us. And I mean, that's the reason now. Arsenal have overtaken us in revenue by 100 million because of the decline of us over that period and the rise of them. If we're both not in the Champions League, our base financials are actually better than theirs because of the stadium. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'd love to get your take, Martin, just before we finish up, as I sort of mentioned in the intro. Obviously, you dropped this story very, very initially around Brooklyn Eric at that time being interested with a consortium of potentially buying the club in its entirety, and obviously that has now raised its head again with these rumours that Levy is looking to sell his stake, which is not unsurprising that Levy would look to sell his shares, given he's been taken off the board and he's a large but silent minority shareholder now. What did you make of that story that's now dropped? I think you wrote an article on this again, didn't you?
Yeah, so I mean, the first I think was David Hellier on Bloomberg, and David's a good reporter. I've known him for a long time, and I spoke to him to try and find out what the background was, and he gave me some information. And basically, Levy is trying to sell. He wants the ultimate maximum price he can get. The Hong Kong fella was the first approach. Then Eric appears to have got involved with him to try to see if there's a deal to be made. I'm unconvinced until I see the colour of a man's money, how much money he's got. But clearly, I mean, Levy, we know, invited Eric around the training ground in the club back in September before he left the club. So he obviously thought he was plausible and a potential purchaser then. The other thing, of course, is that all of those September purchasers potential, which is obviously the Firehawk one and Eric and PCP and Amanda Staveley, had to sign the 6-month no further approach clause. But that runs out on the 6th of March. That's 3 weeks away. So I've been told a couple of months ago that Staveley is still very much interested, and that not to be surprised if she comes back on the scene when the 6 months are up. And I still think that something may be afoot, whether that's a full takeover or just by the shares. I mean, anyone could buy Levy's shares now because it wouldn't take them above the 30% threshold at which you've got to make a full bid for the company. Only by a fraction, but you're just below. I still think if a bid of 3.5 to 4 came in, that it would sell. I do. Because I don't think they're really. I think for all they say, all their promises and claims, I just think they want to make a turn on their dough, but they want to get maximum offer first, which is over 3.5, and that's not a bad profit given what they actually bought the shares for way back when. Who or what the new ownership would be, I do not know, but I do think we are coming into the last 18 months, and probably less than that, of the ENIC ownership at Tottenham. But of course, I could be entirely wrong because I'm not involved. I'm not sitting around the table with the Lewis family. I don't know. It just feels to me that we're getting towards endgame.
Yeah, and maybe there's a realization from them that it's not quite as easy. If it is indeed the kids having some involvement, it's not quite as easy as they hoped, and they're probably weighing up, to the point that we were discussing earlier around the fact that the next stage is really to, if they want to grow any further, they need to improve the football team. That's going to take a massive investment and an amount of time. Do they think, is it worth it? I mean, on this Levy one specifically, I have to say, to me, it's surprising because I don't really see why you'd want to, unless you're in bed with the Lewises and happy to be in bed with the Lewises, or you're indeed, looking for a full takeover and there's some agreement from the Lewises. Why would you invest £1 billion into to be a minority shareholder with no control or say? So, and I know that I think the Telegraph were reporting that the Lewises didn't have first refusal on Levy shares. I have to say, I personally find that very, very surprising because it would probably be the only shareholder agreement I've ever seen that didn't have that first refusal right to the majority shareholder, but who knows? But it would make very, very little sense, I would say, for someone to come in for Levy's stake without either being in bed with the Lewises or getting full takeover. It's different to the Jim Ratcliffe thing, right?
The argument so when I talked to the ENIC people rather last week and asked them what they said, it was like, well, we don't know about this, and it doesn't make any sense for Levy to do this, but that doesn't mean he isn't doing it. And I always thought that ENIC would want to try to force Levy to sell to them relatively on the cheap. And he would obviously try and hold out. So if he wanted ENIC to pay him £1 billion for his shares, what better way to do that than to encourage somebody else bidding £1 billion for his shares? Therefore,
proves the value, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it may be that it's nothing like that. But if you wanted to try and get that amount of money for those shares, isn't that the best way to try to create a market which will force the only real bidder to pay your price rather than the price they want to pay?
Yeah, agreed. Conscious that we've taken over an hour of your time, Martin. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I'm up to Murrayfield for the rugby tomorrow, so I've got an early access to get out.
Nice. But just two more questions for both of you just before we wrap up, and please do like and subscribe in the chat as well. But first one is, as we sort of I suppose following the Tudor appointment, don't even like to ask this, but do we think that it's enough now with the change in Frank that we will be safe? I'll start with you, Martin, before I come to Billie.
One hopes so. I wasn't at the game on Tuesday. I was at West Ham, but my boy was watching, and I basically said, "I think we're going to get relegated." I just felt horrendous, and now I think it might be enough, but only might. It's as I said, 4 wins, and it's safe. Less than that, and it could be a little bit squeaky backside time, unless, of course, Forest go into freefall under the beer-loving Portugueser who's taken over there, who couldn't get a point at Wolves apart from at Spurs at the start of the season. So hopefully, yeah, it just needs a short-term bump. Literally, new manager bounce, keep Spurs safe. Doesn't matter after that. If the first 6 weeks gives you 4 wins, that's done. That's all it needs. Yeah. But no guarantees, are there?
No. And Bill, what's your gut telling you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as Martin. I think I said before, I think Tuesday was the first time that I actually genuinely thought we could go down. I think I've not been dismissive of relegation, but that was the first time where I've actually genuinely thought this is really, really something that could happen now, because we were so bad against a really bad Newcastle team, and then I think if Frank was staying, I think we'd be in big trouble. Hopefully, this will be a bit of a lift, and should hopefully. What I would say though is, it's such a big gamble, isn't it? Whoever they appointed now, if it's a disaster and they lose the first 3 games or something, it's not like it's going to be a sort of disaster that we can recover from. We're going to go down, so it's a massive gamble, isn't it? And would not like to be the people that are in charge of that decision. But
Fulham and Palace are huge games, bigger than Arsenal.
Yeah,
Arsenal
huge.
feels bigger. Fulham and Palace are bigger games.
Huge.
Right.
But I do think we'll see a little bit of a bounce, and I think we'll be okay. But we got some good home form. Not home form, terrible. We got some good home fixtures coming up, so just got to pray that we can hang on in there.
Agree. And then, yeah, I mean, last question. It feels a little bit away with the break this weekend, but looking forward to that Arsenal game. I'm not sure we are actually looking forward to it, but looking forward to it. What's your prediction, Martin, for that game against Arsenal?
I've got to be honest, we've got no bloody chance, have we? They're better. If you would offer me a 1-1 draw now, I would snatch your hand off, because that would absolutely do them in cold blood for the title, and it would make a massive difference. I think what we will get is a better performance, and we'd probably get edged out 2-1.
Agree. And Bill, what about you?
I never like to predict a loss, so I'm going to go 1-1 draw, and that will be an absolutely fantastic result at this stage. So, but yeah, I'm fearing the worst. Put it that way, for sure. I'm not confident about it one bit.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, half the problem is, as we were talking about earlier, that if we had a few more players coming back, at least that might give us a bit of a boost. But I think it's only Porro who could potentially be back, isn't it?
Yeah, but Brentford show
yeah,
you just got to get at them, haven't you? And you can get at them. Just got to give them a bit of fight, which we didn't see, and that we saw the exact opposite of that in the away leg. But yeah, I mean, hopefully a bit of a difference. New manager, new formation might sort us out. But God, what a terrible first game it is for any manager, to be honest.
Although it's a free hit, it is a free hit in that sense.
Hit.
But yeah, thank you again, Martin. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you
That was
so
a
much.
fantastic show, and yeah, please do like and subscribe on your way out. And yeah, we'll be uploading on Apple and Spotify over the weekend for anyone that prefers to listen to the audio format if they missed the start of this show. So thank you so much. And I suppose there's one last thing to say. Come on, you Spurs.